professional light worker and a passionate world traveler. 14 years residence in England, Germany, and Switzerland, and spiritual experiences in sacred sites and the globe around, and spiritual experience in sacred sites around the globe changed his life forever. His spiritual journey has been long and eclectic. Among his most formative experiences are 3 years study of the teaching of Rudolf Steiner in England and a training in his alternative system of education, the Waldorf schools. Initiation as a disciple of Bhagwan Sri Rajneesh, now known as Asha, earning his diploma in astrological counseling from the Astrological Psychology Institute near Zurich after 5 years study in Germany and Switzerland. Initiation as a priest of Wicca. Initiation in the use of Native American prayer pipe with a medicine man in Arizona. 4 years residence in Sedona. Ceremonies in Peru with ayahuasca. Ceremonies in Peru with ayahuasca, frog toxin, and San Pedro cactus. And earning his certificates in mediumship and hands-on healing at Harmony Grove Spiritual Association. I'm reading this from a handwritten piece of paper, and I don't want to complain, but I just had some eye surgery, and I'm not focusing too good on reading right now, because I haven't been fitting with new glasses yet. Anyway, I want you to meet Douglas Barker. He's been here before. We've enjoyed him so much before. He's so educated. He's Mr. Academia. And please welcome from Harmony Grove.
Room to stand here.
Yeah, right.
Maybe I will. I think everybody will be able to hear me clearly. Can you hear me in the back?
Yeah.
Good, okay. Well, let me start out by asking how many people here have ever heard of Huna? Huna, H-U-N-A, which is Hawaiian Shamanism.
What was the question again? I couldn't hear. I was closing the door.
Huna.
Okay.
Is it H-U-N?
H-U-N-A.
Oh,
Right, okay. Now, I'm not talking about Max Freedom Long, who originally came up with Huna. I'm talking about another man who is now still alive and teaching, Serge Kahili King, who has his own version of Huna as a Hawaiian shamanic tradition. However, I'm also going to be pulling in some information from another spiritual teacher whom I've revisited recently. So my talk today is entitled The 7 Principles of Hawaiian Adventurer Shamanism, and then in parentheses, and a bit of Toltec wisdom, because I'm going to bring in Don Miguel Ruiz as well. Now, I have dealt with Don Miguel before, and with Serge King for about 1.5 years, and I find their work actually blends perfectly. Both are shamanic teachers in one a Hawaiian tradition, the other a Mesoamerican tradition. But last week, Deborah asked me to speak on something that would raise people's energy a bit, make people feel a little bit more confident in life because we're going through hard times, etc. So I'm going to talk about these 7 principles today And Serge King had actually worked for an international organization that, like an aid organization in Africa, and he studied in Africa with a shaman for 7 years. He then came back to the United States, where he was initiated into the Kahili family, because traditionally in Hawaii, shamanism was something that was a tradition in certain families, and it would be handed down. If they came across somebody who was very apt at being a pupil but was not a relative, they would adopt them and they would come into the family. And so Serge King studied for several years with this man. He adopted the family's last name as his middle name and now is known as Serge Kahili King. And he's been teaching the principles which he formulated for over 50 years, or almost 50 years now. Now, these principles that he had learned in the course of time, he had of course learned these as a shaman would, through experiences and through discussions with the man, who was in a sense his adopted uncle. And what Serge did then was to formulate them as principles and in the form of individual key words in Hawaiian by which you could remember them. And these should not be regarded as immutable cosmic truths or eternal laws, but more their assumptions about the way that life operates. You could say they're positively effective attitudes in life or insights that really work. So the first of these, the key word is ike, which in Hawaiian means knowledge or awareness. And the principle is, the world is what you think it is. Now that is the principle on which all the others are based. And this, of course, is a very, very far-reaching principle when you begin to think about it. Now, that doesn't mean that your thinking is going to go out and change the physical world around you. I mean, if you see 3 trees growing outside your house and you say, well, I'm going to think them away and walk through them, well, it doesn't work. You'll hit your head. So the physical universe, grandfather, the Great Spirit made that. That's the same for everybody. But the dream that is your life is in this frame that is the physical world. It's how you interpret what happens to you. And Don Miguel Ruiz has pointed this out in his books, that your life is like a dream, and everyone else's life is a dream as well. Now you can adopt certain aspects from other people's dream as yours, but each person is going to have their own take on life. Everything is going to be filtered through the assumptions you make about life, your rules of reality, how you interpret those rules, how you interpret your reality. And it's interesting that yes, you can actually change it. Now, there are corollaries to these various principles because they're pretty far-reaching. For example, all of you come up with systems to explain life and its workings. Usually this shows up in the church that you attend or whatever spiritual practices you carry out. But realize that in a sense those explanations are always arbitrary because they're based on what you yourself choose to believe. And ultimately what is going to matter is not whether it is quote unquote true, but whether it works for you. Now, this goes a little further because when you start to realize that you think your own life or reality into existence, that also means you yourself are responsible for your own world. And a lot of people don't want to hear this. Often, in fact, people will have something happen to them out of the blue and they'll say, well, look, you know, what kind of karma is this? I didn't intend this to come into my life. But the fact that it's in your life means you're participating in it, so you have to do something about it. Now, we can try to trace that back and say, well, maybe that's something I talked about with the recording angel before I came into this life and it was going to pop up now. But the fact is, it's here now and you have to deal with it. Now, this means also that you cannot blame anybody else for your problems. And people try to do this all the time. Often it's their parents or their teachers or authority figures of some sort, and they write autobiographies about how much they suffered and everybody buys them and they appear on talk shows and so on and so forth. But interestingly enough, your parents and your upbringing have nothing to do with the way you're living your life right now. But what you believe about it and how you react to those beliefs certainly do. And as for karma, it can only exist in the present. I'll get into that in a couple of minutes here. But this also means that since feelings come from your thoughts, primarily, that means you're responsible for your feelings too. So it might be a lot of work to try to change this. We can actually create our own experience of life, but normally we don't. Most people, most of the time, are simply running on autopilot. Now, you can actually let go of negative thoughts because you're responsible, or you're actually in charge of what stays in your head. Now, you have these voices in your head that are going on all the time, and sometimes they're different voices. But as Don Miguel Ruiz has pointed out, one of the most important is the inner judge, in some systems called the critical parent. And this judge is always nagging you, always telling you that you didn't do this right, you didn't do that right. You should do this, you shouldn't do that. This is something that you weren't born with. This is something that has been built up through your education, your parents, teachers, all sorts of things like this. You also have an inner victim, unfortunately, and the inner victim believes what the judge says. Now, most of the stuff that the judge is telling you is an absolute lie, and most of what the victim is telling you is a lie too. But it can be a great breakthrough for you when you suddenly realize that the victim is not you. You have these voices in your head all the time, but those voices are not necessarily your voice. They may well be imposed voices on you. And what you develop in the course of time is a whole series of belief systems about life and about yourself. Don Miguel refers to the collectivity of your belief systems as the book of hell, because this is what most people are living in most of the time. And the first lie that you learn in life is that I am not the way I should be. And then people come up with some kind of an ideal, but ideals, well, they come from the spiritual world. They're perfect, but they're not perfect when they have to be lived out in physical reality. So the ideals are in a sense false because you can never actually reach them. So you will always be found guilty by the judge, and the victim will always accept the guilt until you realize that the judge and the victim are two voices in your head, but they're not you. Now, that's the most important of the 7 principles and requires a bit more of an explanation. The second of these principles is contained in the word kala, which in Hawaiian means freedom. And the principle is there are no limits. You could say that comes logically from the fact that the world is what you think it is. If life is a dream, it means there really aren't any limits to thinking, other than limits that you agree on. For example, if you're sitting and you're playing a game of chess with somebody, and you're playing according to the rules, and then suddenly one player says, well, I'm going to take my bishop and move it 6 spaces over here like this, straight ahead. Well, what he's doing is no longer playing chess. Games have rules, and ultimately everything in life is a game, including relationships and work and so on and so forth. And games have rules, and if you don't play according to the rules of the game, they're no longer fun. You're no longer getting the benefit of it. And as far as there are no limits, we also have to remember that everything in the universe is connected. We have, of course, spiritual connections that run through everything. We have etheric connections on the level of life forces, which are closer to the physical. You are an infinite being in an infinite universe. Everything is connected, and we can connect them by way of correspondences. We don't have to find logical reasons or scientific reasons for why everything is connected. As one person pointed out, the Hawaiian Islands are not separated by the ocean. The ocean's what connects them. So we are all connected in all sorts of ways on different levels, and there really are no limits. The third principle in the word makia, which means focus, is energy flows where attention goes. think of where your thinking goes normally and how it operates. Now, manifestation comes, of course, from your thinking, and manifestation is going to be the sum total of all of your attention, including your habitual expectations. Those habitual, sustained focuses are the aspect of your present existence that seem to be enduring because you're constantly giving them energy with your focus. Whatever you're energizing in your life is, wherever you're putting your energy in life is what you're energizing, which means you can focus on your own misery and energize that too. You do have that choice in life. And since this is always happening continually and constantly, it pays to pay attention to what you're thinking about. Now, the converse of this, by the way, is also true. Attention goes where energy flows, which is why if you go to a sacred site in the world, or when you deal with a person who has lots of charisma, your attention goes right to that. You don't have to pull your attention back, your mind's not wandering, because that energy pulls your attention to it. The fourth of the principles in the word manawa, which means time, now, this moment, is now is the moment of power. You can only have power in the present moment, because it's only in the present moment that you can feel powerful or feel pleasure. There's a saying, you can't get wet from yesterday's rain and you can't be scorched by tomorrow's sun. It's always in this moment. And if you're not in the present moment, you're not in the moment of power. The easiest way to be in the present moment is find something that makes you feel good. And then you're right there. Now, what you are today, as I said before, is not simply due to your early environment. It's not due to the, quote, punishment of God or bad karma. Bad karma only exists in the present moment. So your beliefs, your decisions, and your actions today about yourself and your world are creating your present circumstances. Your memories, of course, are the source of a lot of the problem. And you can actually change memories too. There are techniques for doing that. You've probably all heard of the actress Ingrid Bergman. She once said, "The secret of happiness is a poor memory." Yes. But habits of mind and body can be changed, and when you do, you change your world. Now, there's also it means in a way, when you think about this, that now is the moment of power. The past is dead. Anything that was in the past can only exist when you think about it in the present. Otherwise, it's just not there. Now, when you look in the other direction, all of your expectations about the future you can only have in the present moment. So when you are trying to live in the past or live in the future, you're not in the moment of power. Now, when I say now, that also makes some people think rather uncomfortably about procrastination, which lots of people do. Some people procrastinate because they're perfectionists. They always think, no, I can't start doing it yet because I just don't have it right yet. I have to have everything in order. I have to have everything perfect before I can start. Other people don't, simply because they're lazy bums. But the point is, procrastination means that you're refusing to be right in the here and now. And when you really are in the here and now, the procrastination disappears. Now, since you can change memories, this also means you don't want to keep telling yourself the same self-defeating story. You can change that. Now, when we come to the fifth principle, this is summed up in the word aloha, which I'm sure a lot of you have heard, which means love, as well as hello, goodbye, and just about everything else. And the principle is to love is to be happy with. Now think a little bit about that. This means things like to enjoy. If you look at the root words, of aloha, because the Hawaiian language is very adept at having all kinds of hidden meanings when you look at the different syllables and what they mean. And if you would look into aloha, you'd find that it means to feel good about, to appreciate, to have fun with, to be happy with someone, to be face to face with them now in the present moment. In any relationship, the happy part comes from love. The unhappy part comes from fear, anger, doubt, criticism, judgment, blame, all of these negative emotions and feelings and thoughts that we have. Now, remember that love will increase then as appreciation and praise increase, and it decreases with judgment and criticism. If you have to criticize somebody, follow it with a compliment. That way it'll go down a lot easier and you'll get better results. Also, you have to act respectfully towards yourself. You know, in fact, if you look at Don Miguel Ruiz's 4 agreements, the first one is be impeccable with your word. And one of the meanings of that is never use your thoughts or your inner speech against yourself. It's totally self-defeating. It won't do you any good. Now, appreciation, on the other hand, builds aloha. Now, everything is alive and aware and responsive in the shamanic consciousness. So you have to act respectfully towards everything, and that includes yourself. If you criticize yourself or anybody else, suddenly your muscles tense up, you cut off your connection with spirit, things like that. When people learn something under criticism, they're actually learning it in spite of the criticism instead of because of it. And when you make people dwell on what doesn't work, what happens? They tend to repeat it, because that's in their consciousness all the time. And of course, the effect on you is no better if you criticize yourself, because your subconscious mind isn't going to distinguish between what's fact and what isn't. It's just, it gets the input. And if you hear criticism, when it hears criticism, not only of you, but of anybody else, it just becomes more and more critical. And then this builds up inside you. And when people go as far as holding a grudge against somebody, when they want revenge and things like that, well, what that is like, it's like taking poison and thinking it's going to make the other person sick. Not good. Okay, let's see, what else could I say about that? Well, there's a lot of things you can say about love, but I only have so much time. The 6th principle is based on a word, too, that you might have heard, mana, M-A-N-A. Mana means power. It doesn't actually mean spiritual energy, although that might be a component of it. But mana means power in the sense of the power to have an effect. And the principle is all power comes from within. Now, you could say that mana means the power to have an influence, but not to control. And also charisma, talent, skills, knowledge, all of these things together help to make an influence. They build mana. Now, everything has power, and you can learn to work respectfully with those powers. And these can even be with inanimate objects, because remember, to a shaman, everything is alive and aware and responsive. And for example, if you're feeling helpless and you need power, one trick that you can do is imagine somebody that you know about, might be some famous person from the past, or somebody you personally know who is not helpless in that area, who really had a lot of skill. And imagine them very, very strongly, and imagine you're tuning into their mana. And this will definitely help you along the way. And then as far as people's power from within, a lot of people attribute their power to, oh, well, I'm doing these affirmations and they're absolutely wonderful. Or I did this spell last night and I called on the Archangel Michael and the King of the Welsh Fairies and everybody else, and I got exactly what I wanted. But just remember that The affirmations, the spells, any of the tools you use, those are only tools. What they do is they help you to focus your energy, and not a great deal more than that, because the power is not in those, it's in you. Even things that you use all the time, they may have a certain energy about them on higher levels, but they're still just tools that you yourself are using. Now we come to the seventh principle. This is based on the word pono, which means, among other things, rightness, harmony, goodness, everything in its right place. And the principle is effectiveness is the measure of truth. We started out with the world is what you think it is, which is a very spiritual kind of thing, and now at the end, effectiveness is the measure of truth. We're getting right down to where the rubber meets the road. So here you have to ask yourself quite simply, does my life work? And if it doesn't, then you need to look at your beliefs about it. You might also ask, what about my spiritual path? Does that work for me? Because spiritual paths do not, as a rule, remain static. They can change overnight. You can change practices you're on. I tend to doubt that today you're a spiritualist and tomorrow you're going to wake up and say, I want to be a Tibetan Buddhist or whatever it happens to be. But you will find that your spiritual beliefs, you should check them every once in a while. And the practices, are they making me happy? Are they bringing me the things in life that I really need? And if not, then I need to say, well, what kind of a world am I thinking into existence? Am I thinking bummers into existence? Now, what I wanted to do was a meditation with you in order to help you to change, one way that you can change beliefs. Now, if you look in Serge King's books, you'll find there are lots of things. Now, today I'd typed up a 2-page handout to give people and ended up leaving it home. I did bring along 2 books, which are actually here in the library, just so that you know they exist. One is called Kahuna Healing, which is one of Serge King's very early books, but this one, Mastering Your Hidden Self, that is an excellent book. He published that in 1985. And it goes into the 3 levels of the mind, the subconscious, the conscious, and the superconscious, and all sorts of fascinating information about them and how to work with them. But his most outstanding book, we don't have it here, it was published in 1990, called Urban Shaman. And he talks at length about the principles and gives many, many techniques for altering consciousness and changing belief systems, releasing stress, all sorts of things like that. Now, okay, so if you could get yourself ready and simply find a comfortable posture. Now, close your eyes, and I want you to inhale as you focus on your crown chakra. See like a bright white light there, several inches wide. And inhale as you focus on your crown chakra, and then as you exhale, focus on the soles of your feet and see energy pouring down into the earth. Once again, take a nice, deep, slow inhale, visualizing the crown chakra and the bright white light around it. And now as you exhale, imagine it flowing out through the feet, grounding you, going right down into the depths of Earth Mother. One last one. Go up into your crown chakra, inhale deeply, and now out again through the soles of your feet into the earth. Now, at this point, I'd like you to visualize that you're going into a special, quiet place. Perhaps you have an inner garden that you go to regularly in your meditations. Perhaps perhaps it's a glade in a forest, a clearing, or something like that. But many people will have a kind of an inner place where they can go. Sometimes it's a temple. But go to any place where you can feel comfortable and where you can meet with your spirit teachers and your guides. Now, at this point, we're working with the subconscious. And since the subconscious is like a servant, it's good to come up with a name for your subconscious. Now, it's been pointed out often that the subconscious makes a wonderful servant, but a bad master. And what you need to do is now, you might even have a name for your subconscious to personify him or her. And this is valuable in many ways. It can help you to work with your subconscious more easily. But invite your subconscious to appear in this inner garden or wherever you happen to be. And now call in your angels, spirit guides, and spirit teachers. Now, this is something you can do at home. You can do this at more length. You can have conversations with your subconscious and ask it how it feels about certain things in your life. But right now, think of an issue that you need some help with. And it can be any kind of an issue at all. And ask your subconscious to bring up a symbol of this issue. Now, when it appears, it can appear as just about anything. It might be nothing but a color. It might look like a monster. It might look like a scene out of a story. It can look like anything at all. It might even be interpreted or accompanied by things like the way that you interpret it, or painful feelings, or feelings of self-justification. But accept whatever this symbol is, because this is a representation of the issue as your subconscious sees it. Even if it's hideous looking, don't kill the messenger. Just accept it. Now, you have your guides, your teachers, and your angels standing there. Ask them to change or to transmute this symbol into something that is in alignment with the way that you would wish it to be. And if you're not quite sure what that is, just say that you would like to have a different symbol that would be in alignment with my highest and best good. Now, that will happen automatically, and the symbol can change its appearance in any way whatsoever. It might change its appearance, it might change its position in space, it might do something else. But accept it, even if you don't quite understand it. Your feelings, however, will tell you whether it's right or not. In other words, if the symbol feels uncomfortable to you, or if it simply leaves you cold and leaves you feeling utterly lackluster, ask your guides and teachers to give you a different one. But you'll know when it feels right, that this is an improvement in the issue, the situation, the condition, whatever it happened to be. And then show this to the subconscious and say, okay, this is what we're now taking into the subconscious mind. This is intended to bring about change. And you can reassure your subconscious too that it's not going to be violent or unpleasant for the subconscious. It will be in alignment with good feelings and happiness and everything flowing more smoothly for everyone concerned. And if you do this at home, you can also then ask your subconscious to bring up symbols for any related negative beliefs to this issue, and then simply follow the same procedure. Just ask your subconscious, for example, is there any further discomfort in the subconscious? And if the subconscious replies yes, well then have him or her bring up further symbols and then have those changed as well. So I'm going to let you now, for a moment, ask your subconscious, is there another related issue to this? And then ask for that symbol to come up. Now, if the symbol appears alive, well, of course it is alive to a shaman, send some love to the symbol. Even if it looks horrible or pretty ghastly to you, realize that it's an aspect of yourself that is suffering and send love to it. And now ask your angels, teachers, and guides to transmute it into something that would be in alignment with the way that you want it to be, or what would be the best for you. When you do this alone on your own, this can take some time because there are usually lots and lots of related issues that you want to bring up and that will suddenly occur to you. But we're going to stop this now, and this is something you can continue at home if you like. So right now, thank your subconscious for having been of service to you. Thank your angels, your teachers, and your guides. And now you can come back from wherever your place is, your inner garden or your inner sacred sanctuary. And come back now, hear the sounds around you, the street. Realize that you're coming back now into the room. And then when you feel ready, just take a deep breath and kind of let your eyes open up. And then after you open your eyes, kind of look around you and move your hands and feet, and that'll bring you back into your bodies. Now, I wanted to be able to give you resources because I don't imagine that anybody in here has memorized the 7 principles. So there is a bulletin board in here, so I wrote them out in case you want to see them. And I also wrote out underneath it, that's in blue, and underneath it in green, I wrote out a kind of a meditative verse or a kind of a mantric verse that you might find very helpful under certain circumstances when you're going through anything. Serge King originally formulated this in kind of a very short form, but then people pointed out, well, then there's this factor to it, and there's this, and what does this mean, and maybe this could be phrased a little better. And one thing that I really like the term he came up with is, he said, in Huna, there's no real concept that your spirit is any more important than another part of you. There's no hierarchy. So he didn't particularly like the term higher self for your higher consciousness, so he called it the greater self, which is actually a good way of visualizing it, as if it's in a sense larger than you are. Well, anyway, I wrote the verse in there, and it's my own version because there's a couple of slightly differing versions, and this one's kind of explanatory. So the verse runs as follows, and you can imagine, say this to yourself whenever you need to. Everything is working out perfectly, then in parentheses, even when differently. I bless all the goodness around and within me. I trust in the power of my greater self, and I expect the best to manifest for me. Thank you.
Thank you. As you can tell, he's just loaded with wisdom.
Yes.
Yes. I mean, you could stand up there and say this all over again, everything you said, and I would learn more because I couldn't get so.
It's very concentrated when
Yes.
you're trying to do it in a short
Yes.
thing like that. Oh, one of the other resources I wanted to mention, and I wouldn't have been able to bring this with me, at 42nd Street, in October, I gave the principles in the form of a teaching story that I wrote myself.